ahead and start at the beginning. I was born June 13th, 1942 in Carrollton, Illinois. Jerseyville High School, graduated in 1960. I got married in 1963. I was going to SIU, Edwardsville, part-time. The evening before Thanksgiving, 1967, I received a call from one of the people on the Greene County draft board. And he basically apologized to me. He said, we've run out of people, and you're going to get a draft notice shortly after Thanksgiving, and you'll be going in the service first week in January. And he said, we know you only have 2 more quarters to go before you graduate from college. And I'm married. I've been married 5 years, didn't have any children. But he said, basically, we've run out of people. We don't have anybody else, so we're going to have to take you. They knew my father because he was in business in that area anyway at that time. So I told my wife, Judy, who just called me. And sure enough, about 4 days after Thanksgiving, I got my draft notice. I reported to St. Louis on the 9th of January, 1968. Took the physical. Basically, if you could walk and you were alive, you passed the physical.
Yeah.
Sworn in, and this is on a Sunday. They put us on a bus and they bused us to Fort Leonard Wood. There we went into the replacement, or whatever they called it.
Induction center.
The induction center, yeah. I got my hair cut and got my uniforms. They fed us, and then we waited till the next morning. We were assigned to our basic training company. Okay. Thus, I was basically in the big green machine. And a most unusual life started, I guess you could say. Number one, I was older than anybody else. Okay? I'm pushing 26 years old, okay? And most of these kids are 18, so that gives me 8 years. And one of my first assignments in basic training was I became the platoon thief, I guess you could say. I went out and scrounged stuff. Evidently, the sergeants in each platoon sergeant had a little thing going, a little contest going between them, who could have the most scrubbers and polishers in their platoon. So it was a 2-story building, so you had one downstairs. Anyway, lots of times when the guys were out on training, I was acting like I was part of the permanent party, going around stealing shit. I mean, I never got caught, but I was always doing that. And one of the things I did was, when I found out, I guess I'm going to be doing this for most of the training, I took some bleach, a little bit of bleach, and washed one of my uniforms and took the shine off of it. So I looked like I was more of the permanent party. My next assignment was, our company commander was a lieutenant. And about him, he was the only asshole officer I ever ran into in the United States Army. But he was a second lieutenant. He was new and didn't know his ass from the hole in the ground. And the drill sergeants hated his guts, mainly because he never gave the guys any time off on the weekend, which meant that the drill sergeants had to stay around to conduct some training, okay? He kept saying, well, you're not good enough, you're not good. Well, basically, we had the best company there. Anyway.
He was a 90-day wonder.
Yes, something like that. I can't say it. I'm a 90-day wonder. So after basic, I was sent to Fort Polk, Louisiana for advanced infantry training. Right before then, one of the sergeants that was helping the drill sergeants, he had been wounded in Vietnam and he was on light duty and he was helping them. He came up to me about 6 weeks after basic training and said, your orders for Vietnam are already cut. You're going to Vietnam. And he said, you need to make some plans on what you're going to do to try to maybe not go there right away, because most of the guys after AIT, they ship them over. You know? So I said, okay. I said, thanks. I appreciate it. I'll do the best I can. So I went down to Fort Polk. The first thing I did, went down there, I volunteered for airborne training. I figured, well, that's 3 more weeks, right? You know. And so after AIT, I got 2 weeks leave and came up and stayed with Judy for a while. And then went down to Fort Benning, Georgia. I thought I was going to airborne school. When I got down there, I was given orders to report to the non-commissioned officer school. And so this was 6 or 8 weeks of training there. And Judy came down to Benning because on the weekends, we got some time off on the weekends. So we had a semi-life together. She got a job. We had an apartment we shared with another couple. And so I graduated from non-commissioned officer school. I was #1 graduate. So I was commissioned a staff sergeant, E6. That's the three chevrons on a rocker underneath. That's the staff sergeant. And when that happened, staff sergeants are have a little more privileges than regular sergeants and corporals and privates. So they made a lot more money. I mean, God, I was really we're very well. And then I went to airborne school, jump school, and that was a blast in the ass. I mean, that was the most fun I've had in the Army. I mean, it really was. It was fun. It really was.
Did you get to jump every day?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, well, after the 3rd day, we were jumping. So I jumped out of a C-119, that's a flying boxcar. Jumped out of C-130, C-123, which is the noisiest airplane in the Air Force. About 4 weeks after I was in country, I was given orders to report to Recondo School in Nha Trang. That was 3 weeks of intense training as Special Forces. I was trained by Special Forces. And basically we were trained to lead long-range patrols. A lot of our training was medical because with 6 people you can't have a medic. So I was the medical guy. I carried the morphine, I carried the codeine, I carried everything else. You'd be surprised how many people got colds right away and wanted some codeine. But anyway, so each morning we went on a run with full combat gear or basic combat load, plus a pack with a 30-pound sandbag. And that's the way we started the day. To graduate, physically you had to run 7 miles with your 30-pound sandbag and your basic combat load. 7 miles. That's from here to Jerseyville. Okay. Actually, physically it wasn't bad at all. It was just mentally you had to work through.
You had to hike or run?
Run. It's a run.
Combat boots.
Yeah, we're in our full combat gear. And my rifle and my basic ammo load and all that, you know. And one of the reasons they had us carry our basic combat load, but occasionally the group got shot at because you're in country, you know, this is not a safe area.
Sure.
And then the second requirement for was to survive an actual mission. So they would run us out on an actual mission where people are going to get killed or you're going to get shot at. In my group, we lost 1 guy killed and 1 guy wounded.
And that was in a quote-unquote training?
That was training.
Wow. That's...
Yeah, but it's all, there's some articles in there about it. But that was training. My number is 2012. There are about, I think, 2,500 of us total. Of all the troops that served in Vietnam, there's about 2,500 of us. One person said that was the most elite unit in country.
Wow.
Period. They basically told you how to run missions, trail craft, stuff like that. Speaking of that, I was very comfortable in the jungle. I really was. When we would go in on a mission, we'd get out of the helicopter in the landing zone and then run as fast as we could into the edge of the cover.
Right.
And then what you did was you sat down and you waited and you listened, because the jungle will talk to you. It will. And you'll know if something isn't right, because you won't hear the birds. You won't see other animals scurrying around. I actually felt at ease out. The only thing you had to get used to at night when you were sleeping was the little lizards. They're about this long. They'd run over your face, and it took me about a month before I got so I could sleep without them bothering me. The wildlife was quite amazing. I doubt if it's there now. You got to realize this is 50 years ago. Never saw an elephant, but saw the dung and smelled them, but never ran it, and glad we didn't, because there were some stories about some teams that got chewed up pretty good by an elephant. They were quiet. You'd be surprised how quiet an elephant is. You may not believe it, but it is.
Yeah.
They can sneak up on you real quick. Tigers, we had tigers. I never personally saw one, but I heard them. And one of our teams, and you got to understand, we had crazy people. A young tiger, they ran into this young tiger. Well, for 2 days, they were feeding it rations, food, and keeping it around them. And they said, yeah. I said, well, why'd you do that? And he said, well, we knew if the tiger was around, the Vietnamese wouldn't come around, because they were scared shitless of them. So, we didn't even have full guard at night because we had this tiger.
That's interesting.
But you had to watch where you were, because they were man-eaters. And the reason they were Pleiku, Dak To, up in those areas where they had major battles, you got bodies. And the tigers learned to eat the bodies. So there are tales of them snatching people, at night. So,
So
lizard.
the idea, if you fed them and they weren't hungry, the tiger was your friend.
Yeah,
Something like that?
yeah. But it was a young tiger, so it hadn't learned to eat people yet.
Yeah.
And it was in an area where they had many major battles. So there weren't any bodies laying around, see. A battlefield doesn't get cleaned up. I mean, we've had areas where there have been battles before, and we see skeletons and stuff like that. North Vietnamese. In some ways, I felt sorry for them, especially the normal soldier, the private. They really had it hard. The problem is, lots of times they didn't even know they were in South Vietnam. Our best source of intelligence on these people were their diaries. They almost to a man kept a diary, and it was a daily diary. Everything that happened to, because they knew if they died, their body would not go back to their folks, their family, but quite possibly their diary would. So they wrote everything down. So even though we didn't capture anybody alive, once we searched them and got their documents on them and their personal diaries, I mean, the stuff we learned was unbelievable. I mean, because they'd say, well, we didn't have any deed here, or we got shelled here, and we lost 3 people here, and, so that was an excellent source of intelligence. They had their basic green uniform and their little pith helmet. They had pith helmets, is what they wore. But once we worked an area, we knew that area better than they did. And especially when we go back a second or third time, I mean, we knew exactly what was going on. And in a lot of cases, they didn't. And the reason why is they had crap for maps. But the way they moved their people from the Ho Chi Minh Trail, trying to get them in country, was basically by guides. So say this is 100 people here, they want to move them. So one guy would pick them up and move them so many kilometers, then drop them off to somebody else, and then they would move them. So in a lot of cases, these guys really didn't know where the hell they were. They knew they'd been following somebody, but they had no idea what part of the country they were in. And that's the way they move people. And occasionally we would find a group. One outstanding time was we were working with an armored group, and they'd make a sweep, and then in the evening they'd come back fairly close to the road somewhere in there and stay the night. Well, some NVA or whoever were harassing them at night, keeping them up. They would be shooting at them, doing all kinds of things, trying to keep them up. And so I went out there and talked to the company commander, and we decided what we were going to do. And I took a team out, and we stuck them on the tanks. So they rode the tanks till they went to the far end of their sweep, and they dropped off. My team dropped off. And what they were going to do was they were going to set up behind the tanks and see who was walking behind them. Well, rather than 3 or 4 guys, they found an infill group of 300 North Vietnamese were coming down the trail. And they called ahead to the tanks and said, they're headed for you. And there was an opening where these North Vietnamese were going to have to cross the road. And they basically killed them all with the tanks. They actually ran over them with the tanks. It was just they killed like 280 or something like that. That's what we call it. But I called B-52 strikes in, and without hardly any questions being asked, I would identify the target. I said, well, we found this base camp. We're pretty much sure there's people there. Give them the right coordinates, and get it approved. At one time, lots of times, the Air Force would have 3 B-52s somewhere in South Vietnam, just flying around. In this particular case, they were ready. And we were supposed to be 5 kilometers away from the target zone, which good reason because of the bombs. And so I got everything lined up, got the coordinates lined up, and they said, okay, we're going to be here in 30 minutes. I thought, well, shit. And so we climbed up the ridge, got back on the other side, and got the best cover we could, and then the strike came in. And I call it being bounced, the concussion. I mean, you're down like that, and the concussion comes and it kind of bounces you up a little bit off the ground and it slams you down again. And we got bounced really good. We were way too close. We shouldn't have been that close, but we couldn't move that fast.
Right. I mean, it was rare that they responded that quickly, right?
Yeah, right, that quick. But they were fairly close. So they did a good job. They hit what we told them to hit. Yeah, but that's...
So in between your missions, how much time would you have before you had to go out again?
Well, all depends. Sometimes 2 or 3 days, but sometimes we were running every other day, and sometimes sometimes I would go out, we'd come into contact, we'd get pulled back out. If it was in the morning, we'd repack, go back out that afternoon. But most of the time we had a day, so to repack everything, get ready and go. So you come back out, you're free, and then the next day you're going back in. Now my problem with operations is I had to plan all the operations, and part of that planning is selecting the landing zones where we could put people in, and that's one of the reasons I was in the air a lot, because if we're running missions really fast, then I got to get out there and figure out where the hell am I going to put these people in so they could get in to their AOs. So I would spend days But like half a day in an 01, flying around. I got sick in an 01 once, myself and the pilot. We were supporting a team, pulling them out, and it just so happened we were in our artillery was available. And the problem was we were shooting out of 3 different fire bases, and we had to stay in a very confined area not to get hit by the shells. So I'm calling him in, and we had to fly a tight circle. Well, after about 20 minutes, you're starting to get a little wheezy because you're
sure.
like this.
Yeah.
We are like this. So I noticed he wasn't feeling very well. And the next thing I know, he's starting to throw up. And I'm thinking, oh, shit. Well, he throws up, I'm going to throw up. So I took my hat off and I threw up in the hat because I didn't want to have to clean the bottom of the plane out. The old one, we sat on our flak jackets because you didn't have, they're shooting at you. You didn't have any armor there at all,
Yeah.
But it was a fun plane. I got to fly back lots of times when we were going back because you had separate controls in the back seat. You had a rudder, a stick, you could throttle. So he'd basically say fly 90 degrees and I'd take off and fly.